Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image. According to our likeness, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." And so God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. If you would, turn over to chapter 2. Verse 18 says, "And the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone." Amen. And all the men said, Amen. It's not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. Verse 21, "And the Lord caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. Then the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And Adam said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called a woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." 1:27 again, it says, "Male and female, he created them." I don't know if there's another phrase in the Bible with so few words that has so much meaning. Male and female are different. Now, somebody that has little girls, you'll have to talk to them about what they do, but I have talked to women. In fact, I read an article one time about this woman had not been around little boy children, had been raised with only sisters, had been married, and they had a son, and nothing prepared her for this 2-year-old walking through the house whacking things with a stick and just pick up any old kind of stick and it becomes a sword or a gun. Where do they get this? I don't know. It's something that's put in them that just comes right out. And I was reading a book by Cindy Jacobs, and she says, I was riding along, and she is one of these that did not have any brothers, and she says, I was riding along, and I just stopped for a second and was listening to my 5-year-old son in the back seat, and said, it dawned on me, he was not talking, he was just making noise, and all kinds of noises were coming out of the back seat. And she says, I ought to get a clue about this. I'm going to ask my husband about that. And then she got to thinking. She said, I remember when we first were married, my husband would go to the door and he'd open it up and he would start barking outside until he got all the neighborhood dogs barking, and then he'd close the door with a big old grin on his face. And she wrote in her book, says, now I don't believe that all men would do this, but somehow I just feel like they find that this would be an interesting thing. And I thought, yeah. Now women make noises as well, but they're into more, they'll talk. And women generally are oriented toward communication and talking because they're much more relational than men. Anyway, here's some physiological things that happen to men or little boys that do not happen to girls. And it is part of the reason why they're different. Between the 18th and the 26th week in the womb, little boys in the womb, you understand, are given an extra testosterone wash in their brain. Their brain is washed with testosterone. I am not kidding. This is scientific. And the result of this, there are two hemispheres. Some of you think you've been washed twice, but two hemispheres of the brain, and there are connections, fibrous connections between the two, and that testosterone wash destroys some of those connectors, so that Males are much more oriented toward this left brain side, and females do both. Now, don't go there with the jokes, all right? But women will tend to go from both, but each will specialize in a lobe of the brain or a sphere of the brain. And so men are left-brained generally, and women are right-brained. That is not to say that men cannot use the right side of their brain, but because of that wash, they become more left-brain oriented, and women have a tendency to be more right-brain oriented. Now, what does that mean? This is physiological, I know, and I don't believe that's the whole answer, but men and left-brain oriented, being left-brain oriented will be, this is the seat of the logic. They'll be more analytical, factual, and aggressive. I mean, that is just the way you are, guys. And so God has made you that way. And so accept it. But at the same time, ladies, you need to accept that that's the way they are. All right? Now, right brains. Feelings. And women will be deeply caring where it appears that men won't care at all. But women are oriented to be deep carers, so they are more relational. The seat of language and communication is in that right side of the brain. Imagination and intuition. So it works out like this. Women will shop. In the same context, men hunt at the mall, you understand? I'm not talking about going out in the woods. I'm talking about you go to the mall, women shop, but men hunt, all right? You're going somewhere. Women enjoy the drive, enjoy the process, but men conquer the road. And like I was just talking about, so-and-so looks wrong, you know, something's going on, and the guys are, huh? Phone call. Now, I get this a lot. Who was that? What did they say? How did you feel when they were doing that? You know? And I said, what did they say? Well, not much. Was it interesting? Yeah. All these leading questions, and half the time I don't even remember. Did I talk to someone? In fact, Raj, yesterday when I talked to you, I instantly hung it up, dialed the phone, and called Teresa so I could give her the gist of that conversation so that I would not forget, because I knew later she'd be grilling me and get frustrated with me because I wouldn't remember. I wouldn't give her all the details. Can I get a witness? And so ladies like to talk. I mean, they'll get together and they'll just talk to one another. And the guys will get together and we'll grunt. I mean, we have we have a lot of nonverbal communication, don't we, guys? Yeah, younger. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to sum it up with Hollywood has picked up on these. And so phrases like chick flick, concerning movies, chick flick. Now, what kind of movie is that? Well, it is a movie that women would like, but it'll have relational things, and somewhere in it they'll need to cry. Am I right? Somewhere in that movie there's some bawling that needs to happen, and guys won't get it. Look, I mean, I like chick flicks. I mean, kind of in a, kind of. But I don't normally cry at them. I don't see that, you see. But see, women are relational. They identify with the situation, and it touches their heart. Women are like that. Now, guys, there's a certain channel on the cable or satellite, depending on what you get, and they have movies for guys who like movies. And what kind of movies are those? Action, shoot 'em up, a lot of car chases and crashes, explosions, and There's not a great lot of dialogue, but there's a lot of action. Not a lot of character development, but there is a lot of action. Am I right? Yes. Movies for guys who like movies. So these are fundamental differences in the approach to life between male and female. All right? And it causes misunderstandings. Now turn over to we're in Genesis, let that go. Ephesians chapter 5. Now this concerns marriage, but I'll tell you, if you have male or female friends and you're not married, well, take heed. You can learn something this morning, all right? Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. I'm just going to pick a couple of verses out. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. That is a command to husbands, right? Love your wives, all right? Verse 22, 2 verses for women. Well, actually, men work into the second one. But verse 22 says, wives, submit to your own husband as to the Lord. That's directed to wives, not to husbands, right? Wives, submit to your own husbands as you would to the Lord. Verse 33, nevertheless, let each one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. So we have a command to husbands to love their wives just like Jesus loves the church, which is completely selfless and giving, all right? And then women are to submit to their own husbands as they would to the Lord, and that they are to, in that submission, it would be rooted in respect. So respect your husband, all right? Now, I'm going to key off of that and give you a little teaching this morning. There are 2 examples that I want to give you of where one of each side, as I understand it, blew it. All right? Now, we're going to come back to Ephesians, so you can keep your finger in there if you want to. Turn to the book of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel, chapter 1, verse 1. Now, there was a certain man of Ramathaim, Zophim, of the mountains of Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. And he had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. This man went up from his city yearly to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. Also the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. Whenever the time came for Elkanah to make an offering, he would give portions to Peninnah and his wife, to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah, although the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival also provoked her severely to make her miserable, because the Lord had closed her womb. So it was, year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, that she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. Now, probably there was some jealousy on Peninnah's part, because he was blessing her with more than what she got, and she's the one that was bearing him children after all. And in the culture of the day, women that did not bear children were thought of in low esteem. And so she has this thing within herself. She greatly desires to have children, desperately wants children, and it's likely more than just the cultural thing, although that was part of it. And at the same time, the other woman in the household is persecuting her severely because of her barrenness. All right. Now, I find it interesting here that she wanted children, and that is a strong drive in many women. In fact, you don't want to be too general, but it may be a drive in all women, but some have made peace with it, depending upon maybe they were barren, or maybe they're unmarried, or whatever the situation may be. But generally, women seem to want children, and it is a strong drive in them. In fact, when they start getting older, desperation begins to set in. You see that a lot. It's a strong, and even when they become mothers, this is a place where women can become very aggressive. We talk about men being aggressive, but I have seen this mysterious thing called motherhood, that when one of the children, it doesn't have to be a baby or even a child, it just is one of theirs, can be grown. But if you start coming against, or they don't like the way you're treating, they can get their child. They can get extremely aggressive, and sometimes unreasonably aggressive in protecting those babies. Am I right? And so it is a strong thing in a woman. Now, here's Hannah. She strongly desires to have to have a baby. And she is, just extremely grieved in her heart. And so she has this husband that loves her. And so what is his response? Well, he's very generous with her. He gives her double portion of what he gives Peninnah. Isn't that good? And look at verse 8, what he says in comfort to her. Then Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart grieved? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? Now, isn't that sensitive? Isn't that just really sensitive of a husband seeing her distress? He comes and makes light of it. And aren't I, attention to me, aren't I better than 10 sons to you? And she said, no. You follow it. You see where I'm at? Because left brain thinking. He sees her distress and he's sorry about it. He loves her. And so what does he do? Year after year, he gives her more. He says, I'm prosperous. My job is to earn a living for my family. And so I'll just give her more. I'll give her more. And that will, I believe this will make up for her in her loss or lack there. I'll just give to her. Now, from a guy's standpoint, you can say, well, he's doing what he can to try to help her. He's doing something nice. Isn't he sensitive? But see, he's not being sensitive to her in a way that she'll be able to receive it as a woman. Because women, being relational, more deeply feeling than men, what does she want? Now, I'm reading something into this. She doesn't want him to belittle her need or her reaction to it. What she likely wants him to do is sit down beside her, hold her hand, talk to her about it, actually listen to what she has to say. So he can't fix it. And just throwing money at her situation is not going to fix it. It's not going to help her feel better about it. It can't be fixed. Now it can, and it was, through the Lord. All right? But for Elkanah, what she was needing was to be loved. Now I'm going to suggest something to you. There are two great needs. After your primary needs of shelter and food and clothing and all of that are met, the psychologists tell us that there are two big needs in the heart of every human being. And these two, a person it'll always bug them until these needs are met. And number one is that there is a sense in a person that they need to be loved unconditionally. It is in the heart of every human being. Who's the only one that can do that? It is supposed to be met in the Lord. Now, those outside the Lord, it'll always be that vague sense of need never being met. They may not even be in touch with what that is, but they want to be loved unconditionally. And the other great need in the heart of every person is to have some kind of significance, to do something in their life or be someone that people will accept. That person is significant. Now, men, given who they are and the way they are, have a tendency to be stronger in the need of needing significance. And so they, being aggressive and hunters and gatherers and aggressive, go out into the workplace or whatever their particular calling, and they go at it hard. and they measure themselves by the success they get. And so they have a tendency to derive satisfaction and get significance from that. But again, it's empty. They'll never get enough significance because the Lord is the only one that can make you feel significant. He is the only one with enough ability to bring enough attention to an individual. But men have a tendency to have a need for that significance. So guess which one that women major in? Now women need significance too, but I'm talking about majoring. They have this need for love. They want to be loved. And because they're relational and touchy-feely and all of that, they have a need. You, if you're a lady, there's a need in you, and you need to be loved. You need it. You need it. Hannah needed it. And Elkanah missed it because he was coming from who he was toward her, loving her out of what would mean something to him. You understand what I'm trying to get at here? He missed it. David, in his left brain thinking, says there is blessing. God's blessing is upon the house of whoever keeps the Ark of the Covenant. I need that. I'm going to bring it into my neighborhood. So he's rationalized. He's figured this out. He brings it into his neighborhood. He goes out, he lays aside in celebration, lays aside his kingly garments. He dances before the Lord. They do sacrifice. They play music. They just have a party, bringing this back to Jerusalem and to Mount Zion. And look at verse 16 there. Verse 16. Now the ark of the Lord came into the city of David. Michal, Saul's daughter, in parentheses, David's wife, looked through a window and saw King David leaping and whirling before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. Now, she may have had very good reason to despise David. Not so much for what was going on there, but for things that had happened in the past. And you can read those accounts. But she had allowed it to control her so that when she saw David doing, although he was doing a logical thing, he was doing a right thing because this was of the Lord. But she could not see that, could not get past all that, didn't care. She despised David in her heart. And when he came into the house, this is what she said. Then David returned to bless his household, and Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, in a sarcastically, how glorious was the king of Israel today, uncovering himself today in the eyes of the maids of his servants, as one of the base fellows shamelessly uncovers himself. I mean, she just got all over him. He comes in high, after the celebration and great success, and she just starts laying into him. And she missed it with him. And it says in verse 23, therefore Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. Now, many interpret that to mean, well, it was the judgment of God because of the way she was. But there may be a very natural explanation. That because she lit into David in something that was right before God and just laid into him in a vicious manner, he just pulled back and said, well, okay, and never went into her again. Therefore, she had no children. It could be. Now, there is no greater way for a wife to alienate her husband than to disrespect him. And there is no greater way to alienate a wife than not to love her. Hence, God gave the command because of the particular needs of men and women, he gave a command to husbands, love your wife like I do. Because it meets a fundamental need in her for unconditional love, which is rooted in the way she is made. And he tells the wife to respect your husband like you would respect me. Even though he may be, familiarity breeds contempt. And when you live with someone, you see them wrinkles, warts and all, and you see them the way they really are. And sometimes it is difficult for us to love or to respect your spouse because you see them the way they really are. But there must have been something there sometime that you liked when you agreed to get married. And so see that and take a step out there. One must take the plunge to respect or to love. And to respect a husband, it meets a fundamental need of his for significance, which is rooted in the way that he is made, his makeup. If you will do these things, O you wives, O you husbands, it will make all the difference in the relationship that you have with that spouse. And I have often said, I say to young people, marriage can be hell on earth, or it can be heaven on earth. You decide. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husband.